you sort of paint a picture of behind closed doors, Muslims tend to be very extremist, especially, you mentioned even in the United States, 3 out of 4 mosques are preaching anti-West policies. Do you think in democratic countries like the United States, Muslims can have a say-so against and have free speech against their beliefs, against policies in the West, such as policies in Iraq and whatnot? And do you think that does that harm the Muslim image within the United States? But also, secondly, you mentioned how internationally Sharia, the law of Muslims in which it's practiced internationally, do you think it will ever be in accordance with democratic practices? And do you think there are any examples, such as Afghanistan, which is moving towards a democracy? Is there any hope for that, even though you point out so many flaws within the faith and the lack of acceptance?
Well, first if I made the impression, it's not in my speech, if I made the impression that Muslims are terrorists behind closed doors, or that they're all kind of, an insurgency group within the West, that's not true. That's not the impression I want to make. What I want to say is that Islam as a political philosophy, if the Muslim takes off Islam, not only its spiritual component, but also its political component, which is to replace the existing laws with Islamic laws, it's only those individuals who we are supposed to be cautious of. And in that caution, first and foremost, is expressed, as far as I'm concerned, in debate and in exposure. Second, I don't think that is bad for the image of Islam. I don't think it was ever bad for the image of Christianity to criticize Christian dogmas, because that improved the faith and that improved the lives of people who wanted to remain Christians and yet move on and find a way with individual freedoms. The same goes for Judaism or any other religion, and I think the same applies to Islam. What is bad for the image of Islam is for people to invoke Muhammad to kill others, and there is complete silence for Muslim majorities, whereas when there are cartoons of Muhammad that are drawn, we get boycotts and burning embassies and flags and Muslim outrage. That's bad for the Islamic image. What is bad for the Islamic image is every time there's bloodshed in the name of Islam, there's hardly any protest, none at all. There's this eerie, disturbing silence. That's bad for the image of Islam. Is Afghanistan moving towards a democracy? Hopefully, one day it will become a complete democracy. Is it possible to combine Sharia with a democracy? I don't think so. I think it's an illusion to think that democracy, which assumes freedom, and creating institutions that make it possible for every individual to pursue his or her happiness, is compatible with a doctrine that holds that all individuals collectively submit to the will of an entity that we cannot see and live according to the rules of Sharia. Everywhere that Sharia is implied, what we see are large-scale violations of human rights, especially women's rights. So I don't think the two are compatible. But I think and hope that not only Afghanistan, but all Muslim countries will eventually choose the philosophy of democracy over that of Sharia.
You mentioned critical reflection. What else can Vanderbilt students do to promote the individual rights of women oppressed by any doctrine?
Students are, first and foremost, in colleges. You are in a period in your life that you're learning a great deal, and you are supposed to open up your own minds to new ideas and to debate with each other, to test those ideas. Please don't take what I say for granted, but go and see if it is also true, empirically true. And I think that if as students you accomplish that, when you leave college and you are confronted with an injustice, you'll be able to tell the difference between why it is informed and why. But when I'm in Europe, I meet many people who know that wearing the veil, that there's something not right about it, that there's something unequal about it, but they don't know the doctrine behind it. And I think for students to be able to help others, first they have to get informed and well informed, and that gives you, and everyone talks about courage and bravery, but that also gives you the vocabulary to be able to defend what you stand for. That's the only advice I would give to you.
Thank you for coming out. As a Muslim woman, I think that it's very important to discuss the sort of underbelly of the way that some Muslims practice Islam in terms of honor killings or female genital mutilation, things like that, which I personally believe are patently against the religion. But if I understand you, it seems that you criticize Islam with a capital I as opposed to Muslims. And I think this is a little bit intellectually dishonest and simplistic, considering that there's so many varied and multiple views of what Islam is and what the interpretations of Islam is. For example, stoning is nowhere in the Quran itself, it's interpretation. So I'd like for you to address that. Are you criticizing the religion as a whole, or the way that some Muslims practice in the name of Islam?
Okay. In the whole discussion on Islam today, what you see, there's a view, a school of thought that says the problem is Islam itself. I belong to that group. There's an opposing group that say, no, Islam has been misunderstood. It's not in the Quran, or it's being misinterpreted. Muslims are the problem. And it's not just Muslims in general, but a fringe, a very, impressive minority that has hijacked the religion. I don't think that is the case. I think that Muslims are diverse human beings, and that Muslims, especially those who try to practice the faith as purely as possible, are the ones who are acting on Islam with a capital I. Stoning is not in the Quran, but it is in the Hadith. And Sharia law, most of it is elaborated on in the Hadith. And everywhere that Islamic law is applied, be it Saudi Arabia, Iran, parts of Pakistan, parts of Nigeria, or Afghanistan under the Taliban, what we see are stonings of women. And then it becomes interesting why those of us who were born into Islam and live in free countries, whether I've left Islam but you are still in it, why are we so obsessed with saving the image of Islam instead of talking about those women who are stoned or who risk being stoned as we stand here, who are going to be flogged, the people whose hands are going to be cut off? Do you know what happens to gay people in Iran right now? In the name of Islam and Sharia, they are hanged. And I think that it is then very important to reorganize our priorities. First, human rights violations, address that. And once that's out of the way, we'll worry about polishing the image of Islam. And actually, it'll polish itself.